Fox News continuing coverage of the EgyptAir jet that crashed overnight on its way from Cairo to Paris with 66 passengers and crew on board. The likely cause, terrorism, according to Egypt's government, but all possibilities are being investigated. The plane went down in the Mediterranean Sea somewhere off the Greek island of Crete. Greece's defense minister says it spun all the way around and suddenly lost altitude just before vanishing from radar screens. The White House says the U.S. is ready to help with the investigation. The latest from Fox's Greg Palcott live at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, where the doomed flight took off. Greg?
Hey, folks. Yeah, that's right. The terminal behind me, Terminal 1, Charles de Gaulle Airport, just 24 hours ago was the scene of that flight pulling away from the gantry-way and getting ready to take off. And now, 24 hours later, there's still more confusion. EgyptAir, just in the past 15 minutes or so, has come out and said that it will not confirm that the debris found on the surface of the Mediterranean Sea a few hours ago was in fact a part of their stricken airplane. It had said via the Egyptian government that it was in fact the plane, but you got to believe that debris will be found if in fact this other debris wasn't part of the plane. There are ships and planes from the U.S., the UK, France, Greece, Egypt, covering an area there and scouring not just for the debris, but maybe more importantly the black boxes, which recording devices, which should hold some of the answers to this mystery. It's a mystery that's been plaguing the families of the victims. It has been a very long day here at this airport and also the Cairo airport, which was to be the destination for the plane. They were waiting for any kinds of answers. In fact, some families here in Paris got onto another EgyptAir plane this afternoon and flew to Cairo just to be closer to the action and maybe closer to some resolution. But that resolution still not coming. French President Francois Hollande helped a little bit to try to bring some information to the families and others. He was the first official really to confirm that the crash had happened and the first top official to raise the specter of terrorism possibly being behind this. Again, that is not a guarantee, but it certainly got people worried here and in France, in Paris. Right now, according to reports, investigators are interrogating the staff of the airport that had any kind of contact with that EgyptAir flight before it took off last night. We're talking about baggage handlers, we're talking about mechanics, we're talking about cleaners, just in case, in fact, if the terrorism line gets stronger, that they could find out maybe who was involved. You got to remember that back in December, the Paris Airport Authority fired 70 people on its staff for having some kind of ties to Islamist thinking. But again, we have to underscore, as Fox News has been doing all day, that it is not confirmed terrorism, that all options remain open. It is too early. Mechanical, technical fault, that is being looked at just as hard. But again, a lot of questions and some tough times here. Back to you.
All right, Greg, thank you. So, Eric, the Egyptian aviation minister saying that the crash of EgyptAir Flight 804 is more likely the result of terrorism. It seems pretty certain that that's the direction it's going in. If they're in fact saying that at this hour, there's obviously developing facts that they know, ongoing investigation, like Greg Palcott said, a lot of people to interview in terms of who had access to that plane.
So, right, and now that they've said this, I think both the French, Hollande early on said it looked like it could be tied to terror, could be, and then, as you said, the Egyptians as well now. So now that this can of worms has been opened, let's talk about it a little bit. This plane started, at least it made one stop in Tunisia. Tunisia was the birthplace of the Arab Spring, violent and nonviolent protests, remember that? ISIS has claimed that they're going to attack Europe, specifically France. They said they were going to continue to do that. We had the Paris attacks. We had Charlie Hebdo. We had other the Paris what's it called? Bataclan. Yeah. And then you see Paris to Egypt. So you have the juxtaposition of Europe and Arab world, right? Again, if this is true. There's extensive naval assets in the area by the U.S., by the Greeks, by other European countries, by the Egyptians. They're going to find out what happened to this fairly quickly. I think this isn't going to be one of those Malaysian air flights. But again, 70 people, as Greg Palcott pointed out, were escorted out of this airport alone for having ties to Islamic belief. Europe has to step it up. They got to clean this mess up.
Yeah, because what you see here is that the easy accessibility for terrorists to be able to, wreak havoc, take lives, and create panic and international alarm, Dana. From the time when you were in the White House, if an incident like this happens, talk about the cooperation with the U.S., with the different countries like this when they're going through an investigation, because we have tremendous assets, especially as it relates to determining what happened in aviation fatalities.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that the Americans do best, right? We always offer help in whatever way it can be taken. In this case, if it's forensics evidence or sort of intel, or as Eric was saying, if there's naval assets that can be used. The thing that's difficult when you're either at the White House or if you're in a position of responsibility or power is to wait to comment, because we don't know. It could have been mechanical. Now, planes have improved over time in terms of safety features, and you don't see as many crashes as in the past. So your mind, I think, instead of initially, it used to be that you would first think, oh my gosh, something must have happened to the plane. Mm-hmm. Now our first thought is, oh my gosh, somebody must have taken that plane down, and it was probably Islamic terrorism. There's lots of reasons to think that it probably was. It's just difficult to hold back until you have more information. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We're going to get a chance to talk to Catherine Herridge in the next block, but as I understand, there's no claim of responsibility yet. So that's a little bit unusual, but ISIS has been slower to do that than al-Qaeda was. Yeah, it's a great point. And then also we have to see, because right now what they're doing as well, Dana, to your point, is monitoring that kind of chatter across the internet and social media forums to see if any one of these groups, in fact, steps up to claim responsibility. And then that's also coupled with the forensic investigation to locate wreckage, determine, in fact, what exactly happened and what part of the plane. They have some information in terms of flight pattern, the trajectory, and then going in that 360. So Juan, from this point forward, in terms, of the investigation, they're trying to talk to all of these people to determine if anybody had something to do with it and who has kind of threads of information.
So what we've got here, Kimberly, is a wonderful mystery. Mm-hmm. So it's a horrible incident, but wow. So this plane takes off. Everything is fine. Everything is good. In fact, the pilot is talking to the Greek air controllers and making jokes, and then says goodbye in Greek. I mean, like, I'm happy, everything is fine. Then the plane, as it enters into the Egyptian airspace, does what we've been showing you here on Fox, which is the plane first swerves to the left. Mm-hmm. Then it does a complete 360. It looks like Greg Gutfeld dunking. It goes in a total circle and then plunges 15,000 feet, then plunges again all the way into the ocean. So the thought is, wait a second, there are three possibilities on the table. Terrorism, that's the one where everybody's afraid of. That's why it's, front and forward here at the moment. But why wouldn't they have if they were blowing the plane up, wouldn't they have blown the plane up earlier? Okay, secondly, what if it was mechanical, as Dana was saying? What if it stalled out? What if something, just went crazy and there was a stall? Could that be it? So you have explosion, you have stall, and of course, in either case, could it be that someone broke through the air pilot's cockpit?
Yep. The only thing is, I think there was some indication that from some of the infrareds and some of the radars and some of the other assets they have in the area that there was some sort of flash and some heat and some pressure change that would indicate explosion. That's why a lot of the news services were going with explosion most of the afternoon.
Well, that's the question, is why wouldn't they have exploded the plane early? Why did you wait until you're in Egyptian airspace? The other point that I think this is what you were saying, and it just strikes me, they had the Russian plane. I don't think anybody can forget this. They just had a Russian plane, I think it was last October, that was blown up. And the Egyptians were very slow to talk about terrorism in that case. I think it took them 4 months. But in this case, you see the Egyptian Civil Aeronautics team saying, we think this was terror. What is going on there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and so obviously there's a lot to consider, but when you think also about the international impact of this, and De Gaulle Airport having very strong security record, coupled with the fact that this particular type of Airbus has an excellent mechanical and safety record, that's with some of the paths pointing again, along with the intelligence reports, that it's terrorism, and so now they're going to find out who did it.
Well, you brought up Bataclan, and we were talking about this earlier, that more than likely could have been an inside job because Jesse Hughes, the lead singer of the band, noticed some of the people that were there later being part of the group that killed everybody. So, when you talk about the baggage handlers, the food prep and all that, it's entirely possible it's an inside job. What I find interesting and confusing from a naive perspective about this, with all the technology that we know and that we have, and the satellites and the cameras and the artificial intelligence, the fact that in our world nobody ever disappears anymore. When a child goes missing, it's a matter of time, within days, that they find them, or it's always somebody they know. Nothing really ever disappears, and that's why it's so strange when this happens, when anything goes awry and an airline isn't notified. It's like they don't know. Like, why isn't there like a live feed from a cockpit that's always there, that's sent to a cloud, so that you can hear and know exactly what's going on, and that there will be real-time relays of delays and stuff like that. It amazes me that this is one of those areas that you just don't know. There are flights where we assume a conclusion that we aren't even sure about, whether it was a pilot suicide. We don't know. We don't know if it was pilot error or the pilot, or they got a fight. Like, why did you brought up the fact, why did it...
Swerving.
Yeah, and we were talking about it in the green room, that it could have been a struggle that caused it to swerve. And that's why they waited till the pilot got out, or maybe who knows.
So that's why they have to ongoing investigation indeed. But can you imagine perhaps the chilling effect on travel in Europe and the Middle East, etc., given what's transpired here?
To that end, I mean, the fact is it shouldn't have a chilling effect, because that is I hate to say that's because the terrorists will win cliche, but this is still, you're safer in that plane than you are driving to the airport. And you have to remind yourself of that. And the reason why terrorists do this is to create a spectacle. They go after planes for the point of the spectacle. And if you give in to that spectacle, then they will continue to do it.